Kia ora, good morning, and thank you for making your time available to talk to us this morning, Barbara.
Oh, whaatalofa atu. I'm here in Wellington, and it's a very, very beautiful Wellington day. But I can't see outside my office. But having a drive here from Porirua, it was a beautiful day to drive home, drive into work.
Malo waftai. Well, it's good to hear. Lo maria mai malei mo Wellington nei tai out. Okay, now Tatu Telenoa last week, Honourable Minister Etiasiasimai Aukilani, Ieni mea na e Molimawina, tulang fo Iena I ngana fia I lolonga last week.
Yeah, so I arrived in Auckland on the Friday, and I went to the Congregational Church in Wadden Place in Mangere. There is South Seas had set up a response hub, and then I also 50 metres down the road at the old Mangere Fun Pools, which is what I remember it as a child, or the Moana Kiwa Pools. There was also another response hub there, which is being led by our Filipina, Councillor Al Filipina. It was quite clear the need was great. But the response by our community leaders, by our government agencies who also had, we had tables there on the ground, as well as all those amazing service providers. You could really see that having that one place that Ainga could go to and they could access all the different help that they needed, whether it be from clothes to stationery, to talking to the Ministry of Education or getting access through for housing needs. It was a really good way that our community stood up really quickly and then addressed the needs that people needed on the ground in Mangere. So obviously we're still not out of the woods. We have another cyclone storm coming through this weekend. So I really urge our listeners, our ainga and all our families out there to be prepared. Make sure those gutters are clear. Make sure you've got enough food and water for 3 days, just in case. But we're basically going to keep a very close eye on it from central Wellington as well.
Okay, Honourable Minister, there was another 5 million announced by Honourable Prime Minister Chris Hipkins earlier this week, and I guess on more business. Are you able to elaborate on that?
Yeah, so the $5 million support packages for business is on top of the additional packages that were given to, such as money given to the Mayoral Relief Fund, our civil defence payment. So the $5 million support for businesses, that includes $3 million for discretionary funding through Pacific Business Trust. So if our Pacific businesses need assistance, you can contact the Pacific Business Trust for help there. There's also $1 million for mental wellbeing support. What our Minister for Small Business was saying when she was up there earlier in the week is that the mental health on the businesses is really hard, but actually for everyone. You've just come through COVID and now you've had we've had these floods. And there's also another $1 million there for business advice that if people need it. Inland revenue as well, but myself being a tax lawyer, I know there's the waiver of penalties for late payments if you're in those affected areas. So that's just part of the package, the business support package. But again, that's on top of the rest of the social package that ministers announced at the end of January.
Yeah. Okay, Honourable Minister, not sure if you did have time away at Waitangi last weekend. I found out from Chris Hipkins, I think one of the things he did mention is that maybe it's better to multi-focus about the issues about Waitangi, not politics. What do you think about that?
As I've said to you previously, I'm married to a Māori from Ngāpuhi, and as Opito has said a lot of times in his ministerialship, we are becoming a very bicultural, multicultural society. So for me, obviously that tuakana taina relationship that we have as Pacific people with Māori people, outside of New Zealand, Māori people are known as Pacific people. So we have to make sure we keep strengthening those relationships, because we're doing them currently through having children that are Māori and Samoan and other Pacific nations.
Yeah.
But for us is to make sure that, they do, the Māori people, through the Treaty of Waitangi, there is that special relationship.
Yeah.
So we have to honour that. And like everything that's happening, we are becoming more multicultural. And so therefore, for me, it's a very personal responsibility I have, both for my children and for other children of Māori and Pacific descent.
Yeah. So do you believe watu ia tangata porkiki le taimi o le Waitangi o se mele lei focus on the issues about Waitangi wale whaongaina tulanga wha porkiki, not politics, as Chris Hipkins said?
Yeah, I think, the thing is with politics, politics is about people and it's about what really matters to people at the time. So for us, making sure we keep our eye on the issue and what is impacting on Māori and Pacific people, again, because of that special relationship, we should be focusing on that, on the issues that actually really matter, and in the way that we honour Waitangi and the treaty, which is, again, has been the doorway for us as Pacific people to come into this nation.
Okay, Whafte Lava, Honourable Minister Barbara Edmonds. There was some announcement from Chris Hipkins earlier this week, Barbara. Three Waters Reform Bill, the merger, DVNZ and RNZ. What do you think? Is that good for our people, Pacific Island people? Or?
Yeah, well, it's good for us in the sense that the whole point of re-looking at these extra projects and whether we need to do them or not, it's about focusing our government's priorities on what really matters right now, and that's the cost of living. I know for, in particular, your Radio Samoa, it's so important to make sure that we have Pacific voices, we have Māori voices, we have ethnic voices. So, the whole point of that change in the first place was to amplify that. So even though the work has stopped on the TVNZ Radio New Zealand entity merger, making sure that we get additional funding is where, for our voices, Pacific voices, to come through is important. Obviously, with the Three Waters changes, you've seen up in Auckland how important it is to have a really strong infrastructure system. Minister McAnulty, who's looking after that program, will come back to Cabinet with some reforms in it. I'm well versed in the Three Waters because of my previous role as the chair of the Finance Expenditure Committee. But for me, I know right across the country, including in Porirua, where I live, the infrastructure does need to change, and the government needs to be able to support councils and come together and find a solution for it. So the Three Waters program is changing, and we'll have more information about it to come. Probably one really, really big change, though, is the minimum wage increase by the rate of inflation. That affects so many Pacific people. And so increasing it by 7.5% or $1.50 per hour, that comes in 1 April. So that is such a, we've got a lot of pressure from people saying you shouldn't increase it, but actually we know as Pacific people who have a number of people on the minimum wage, that sort of policy does make a difference. And it's all for us, but making sure we put the focus on the cost of living and the things that really matter today.
Manula wa isa nol tulanga le minimum wages tilole amatela mo aprila. Honourable Minister le facilitate because people keep saying minimum wage is going up and inflation is still high. Cost of living is still high. So elise swinger. Especially our low income family in Pacifica.
And that's why you need to look what we've done with changes to working for families. Increasing the abatement threshold in that's happened, the cost of living payment that was received last year. Obviously, the extension. So since I last saw you, there's been the extension of the public transport, the RUP changes. So all those different measures, even though it may not be able to increase incomes, it makes the expenses reduces the expenses on the other side for families. We're still doing work, especially around the food area with the supermarket, the grocery work that's happening through Dr. Duncan Webb, who is the new minister. But I totally acknowledge times are tough. For me, when I was coming through, when we lived in Otahuhu, and we had just 2 children, we only had $8 in our hand at the end of the week.
Right.
So I'm very, very, very aware of those issues for our families.
Yeah.
And that's why it's important for me to be at the cabinet table to reflect that. And it's a real focus for our government. So we know there's more work to do, but things like increasing the minimum wage by inflation is something that we believe it needs to be done right now.
Mahalo whafte lava, Honourable Minister. Lesi vaianga le lei mo tātunga Pacifica, bewa petu sa malawhinga tulanga le fuel tax now extended till June. That will save a little bit of dollars for most of our families.
Yes, that will do. Yeah, it definitely will. I mean, obviously, besides housing costs, transport costs are really big things for families.
Yeah.
But also, we've just schools just started for a number of families. So, the fact that their children, if they need to catch the bus to school, the train to school, there's half-price fares.
Yeah.
So that's a really important. I know for a lot of families that I've spoken to, that's been a huge help for them.
Okay, Honourable Minister, is there any other thing you want to talk about before we end our?
No, I just want to, again, thank you very much for the opportunity. I've only been in the job for a week. At the moment, I'm setting up our ministerial offices here in Parliament. We've got a course that I'm doing for new ministers. It's very interesting. But again, just acknowledge your listeners. I know that times are really tough out there, especially for those in Waitangi. If you happen to be in Wellington, there's the Pacifica Festival here in Waitangi Park. So please come down. There'll be, our Whale Malaya there from Lord Manaval, Dame Winnie Laban. They'll be there to have a talk to people, Pacific Business Trust. But again, there is a number of places that we know that over the next wee while it's going to be really tough for people. So our job and my job is to make sure our Pacific voices are raised to that level.
Honourable Minister Barbara Edmonds, Whafte Tele Lava, thank you so much for your time. We have a lovely weekend.
Yeah, you too. Thank you very much.
Whafte Lava. Yeah, I'll let you go to my time in the start. I'm going to speak Honourable Barbara Edmonds and then if I time will tie out to tour with the Samoa for